everybody. Thank you for sticking it out, not only through the weather, but through the whole day and being here and knowing that we're standing between you and happy hour. We're gonna have a lot of fun here. So thank you for your attendance and your time. As hopefully you've all, attended at least one of the breakout sessions or one of the main stage sessions, you know that the theme of the day is how we're putting AI to work for the government. We're gonna keep that conversation going this afternoon on how we apply that to streamlining supplier operations and building overall supply chain resiliency for our government. So how do we do that? The AI platform is built for business transformation for the government. It's a single system of action where work flows across the technology landscape, operations, departments, employees, suppliers, and empowers everybody who interacts with the government. That can only happen when AI is on one platform that is deeply connected to every part of your agency. So your employees work seamlessly, your general public engages effortlessly, your suppliers engage effortlessly, and so that agencies interact with each other effortlessly. So let's walk through the platform that enables this. We reduce spending and drive efficiency by leveraging generative AI, data, and workflow automation. So we act as the control tower that's integrating people, processes, data, devices for better organizational efficiency and agility. And so essentially we're creating a single pane of glass above all the legacy systems that without a doubt exist in your landscape, and so that we can create better experiences together. So my name is Shadeh Ardani. I am a federal solutions specialist. I've got a particular lens on our DoD business. I'm joined today by my partner in crime here, Mark.
Yep, I'm Mark Alber. I am the staff outbound product manager for supplier operations and sourcing and procurement operations. Spent most of my career in public sector as well as in procurement, so really excited to dive into the topic today around how we can really leverage AI agents across our supplier organizations. So quickly, just to cover on what we're going to be discussing today, right? I really want everyone to understand, why it is we're doing this. So what's the current state of supply chain that is really driving this need for transformation, and really why is resiliency like the top of mind for everyone within this domain? And so we'll talk a little bit about what is supply chain resiliency, and then we're going to offer you some solutions, not silver bullets, right? And the beauty of the platform is that we do have tons of solutions that all work together, operating across one data model. And as you use these things together and in tandem, they act as force multipliers against themselves. And then lastly, we'll talk about some outcomes, what you could expect when operationalizing solutions like ours. And so first, I really want to tell a story. I think it's just one of my favorite things to do when really discussing supply chain, to really help us ground ourselves in the subject matter, right? And hopefully you're going to recognize some key parts of this story that really apply to what you're doing day in and day out across operations. And so the only thing that I love more than supply chain is pickleball. And so I'm going to tell you a pickleball story that has to do with supply chain to help us get on. And so I play competitively. In fact, I play every day if I can. My wife doesn't always allow it. But I was in the market to try and source for a new paddle. I needed it for the next competition I was looking to play in. And so I was really doing all of my advanced planning to make sure that I had what I needed, where I needed it, when I needed it. And when I went to go order this paddle, unfortunately, I got a very poor experience right out the gate. It was out of stock. Deliveries were delayed for the next batch, and so what I recognized immediately was that this particular manufacturer was really operating just in time instead of just in case, right? And what we've seen is this trend starting to reverse from that, right? Where I think COVID really set everyone aflame, right? And so we started seeing everyone move more to the middle, which is where resiliency ultimately lies, right? The other thing that I was really trying to struggle with was once I did order that paddle, knowing fully well that it was going to be delayed a little bit, but I was okay with that, right? paddle shipped, I had visibility exactly where it was going, great. And that's important because visibility is missing across supply chains and is critical for operations to be resilient. If I don't know where things are and where they're going, well then I have more questions, right? And so as I started to track this shipment of my paddle, one thing became very apparent. I live in Austin, Texas, and this thing is headed to Boston, Massachusetts. I know these cities sound the same, but they aren't, right? So that immediately kicked off my response, which was like, oh gosh, what the heck? And so I tried to go and figure out, okay, what information can I gather to try and solve for this problem, right? But the problem that I had was everything that was given to me was either delayed or just incomplete or non-existent, right? So finding any sort of real-time touch point to figure out what exactly the current state of what I was waiting for, what I sourced, was impossible. So naturally, what I did, what everybody does when this starts to occur, I picked up the phone and started hammering out some emails because it was literally the only recourse I had, meaning low-tech solutions across supply chain are prevalent everywhere, right? And we are oftentimes, with no other recourse, forced to use these low-tech solutions, much like my favorite one, Excel. And so once we finally started getting some sort of communication going, it became even more apparent that these folks had no concept of workflow whatsoever. I was being passed along to just about everybody, trying to get a simple answer with no answers given, right? So no workflow existed. What was happening behind the scenes that even this manufacturer wasn't aware of was that their supplier had an outage of their own. There was a factory fire where they produced the foam that goes into the paddles themselves. And so that was the root cause of all the delays. And because no one really knew that until the last possible minute, there was nothing that could be done. The one thing that we will never have enough of in supply chains and supply chain organizations is time, right? We'll never be able to get it back. And so hopefully through this story, you've seen through my pain, that paddle never did actually arrive, was that these problems that I face in a very consumer experience are prevalent across enterprises and government as well. They're the same experiences, but at scale are so much worse and create millions, if not billions of dollars of waste. And that is what we're trying to ultimately solve for, is to get that out. And so my experience was like this, right? There was a messy middle with a myriad of systems that existed or didn't exist, or homegrown systems in place as well. Transactions flying everywhere, but because they were all within their own silos, the end result was my poor experience, the systems not talking to each other and sharing information, right? All of this process was just a mess. There was no orchestration at all of activity, and ultimately, there was no even concept of compliance, right? Which is something that we have to always be aware of anytime we have a sourcing event, because that's the number one thing that can oftentimes lead to even more disruption, and of course, fines and penalties that we have to overcome, and even reputational damage. And so with this experience, right, to me, if only there was a way to solve for it. And to me, the way I see this solution is being through resiliency, right? That middle ground between just in time and just in case. But how do we get there, right? Well, first off, we have to be able to have access to the signals that are telling us something is going wrong, some sort of detection. We need to have the data to support what we're actually doing. What is our demand? What is our forecast? What is the number of stock within our warehouses, right? All this information is necessary, along with some understanding of the risks that we incur, especially when managing third parties like our suppliers. Beyond that, what was also necessary was for us to have the ability to quickly and collaboratively work together within a workflow and to have orchestration play its part so that when we are working with these third parties, right, we're able to have a experience for them that they can come to understand and know because it's replicable and it's the same every single time. Structure, right? And then lastly, once things are humming, we need to have the ability to be able to then monitor, and then once that monitoring of that process, have the ability to improve it. So having reports and dashboards embedded and have AI to help drive us to key results and key indicators that matter the most to our business, that keep those core business processes running, and give us some ways to be able to make them more efficient. If I can't measure it, it's not time-bound, then there's no way I can get any meaningful action out of it, period. And so this is where, in my opinion, the ServiceNow platform is uniquely adept at helping supply chains become more resilient and helping streamline our supplier operations to support that. And so when I think about the overall platform, and especially in conjunction with the value chain, right, there are specific purpose-built solutions across the value chain that help build up toward the goal of supply chain resilience. It's not about ripping and replacing your core systems of record like your SAPs or your Arebas, right? But acting as a force multiplier on top of them, allowing for the workflow to get data that we need at the time we need it to support the decisions that we're making and the approvals we need to make ultimately to get things from point A to B where they're needed the most. So, for example, we have supplier lifecycle operations, which helps us with the onboarding process that gives visibility to both the suppliers as well as supplier managers throughout the entire onboarding cycle, letting us know what things we have to collect still, what things we've already collected, ensuring that that experience is consistent across all suppliers with consideration of what those suppliers do for us, whether it be services, commodities, whatever. On top of that, having access to things like enterprise asset management also gives us a picture of what we even have on hand. So if I am going to start thinking about sourcing something, well, shouldn't I figure out if I have it within my warehouse before I go procure it from somewhere else, right? So having visibility into those assets, whether they're fixed assets, whether they're hardware assets, software assets, whatever, having the ability to reference that information that we have on the asset in conjunction to what we need and what we'll be sourcing is incredibly critical to making sure that we are being efficient, especially as we consider spend. Another example is our customers, right? Probably the most important part of the value chain. And so by allowing us to have all of this information around the risk that's being presented, what we have, and the suppliers that are providing us the commodities and services we need, when a customer has a question, we need to be able to answer it quickly, confidently, and with data to back up that resolution, right? And so by having this value chain lined up to the solutions within the platform that sit on top of these core systems of record, workflow allows us to move across the enterprise like never before. We talk about silos. They no longer have to exist anymore except for when privacy is necessary, which, of course, we have thoughts and security around that as well, right? Always forefront. And so what are a couple of use cases that aren't so pickleball related that might I apply this to that would make sense for my operations? First example I use is pretty common. I don't think anyone in this room has not seen this before, right? It's supplier shortfalls, right? When I order something and there's no way for me to get it, right? Because simply the supplier doesn't have it. When I want to get it from the warehouse and it's not there because the supplier wasn't able to provide me that material or that commodity, right? When I think about this in the context of federal government and the operations that we run and the troops that have to have the equipment they need to do their jobs out in the field and out in their own ops, having just what they need is a pretty big deal, right? It can make the operation run late, which has other really consequential downstream impact as well, right? So we want to make sure that when we are going into an operation, we have what we need in the quantity that we need it in. The second thing that we ultimately need as well, though, is to make sure that the supply that we are sourcing is of the quality that is up to the standards that we have committed to our troops and to our constituents, right? If I send a troop out into an op with a helmet that doesn't have the foam inside that helps it mold to his head, well, now that troop is in danger, right? Because if he moves his head just a little bit, that helmet starts coming aligned, and now there are other problems we have to consider. So quality, especially with consideration to those operations, is paramount. The next thing we have to consider is compliance, especially regulatory compliance. We are in the midst of some pretty severe and drastic compliance changes as we speak with the new administration. This isn't just the US that goes through these cycles, right? It's every country in the world, right? And so as these changes occur, we need to make sure that we not only know what these changes are, but they are proactively applied to the activity that we are taking part in order to source what we need in order to have successful operations. And so by having compliance in the process, this can allow us to constantly monitor for it and ultimately be aware if anything is out of compliance, right? A good example of that as well in a compliance standpoint is when we source, for example, textiles for uniforms. So I don't really want to be sourcing these from factories that are involved in unsavory labor practices, right? These are in gross violation of the regulations that we have put in place for very good reason, right? Sometimes it just happens. We don't know, right? I had no idea this supplier was doing this because the tiers of suppliers go so far deep where their supplier is doing this. But I mean, if I'm not sharing data, how would I even be aware of it? Until a news article pops up, and now I've become hyper aware of it, right? And so by having the proactive measures in place to make sure that we are remaining compliant, it avoids that risk that comes when all of a sudden we do discover bad news. And of course, when we do discover bad news, because it does happen, right? We can have the best, most perfect processes in the world, and something still will go wrong, right? There are so many factors that are out of our control. So when we need to swap out something and have some sort of material change, we also need to have a process in order to ultimately ensure that as we swap these things in and out, that we are remaining compliant, that we do have the testing and the engineering involved in order to accept these changes, right? Maybe not so big of a deal for a uniform, super big deal for a 747, right? So making sure that we have the ability to have workflows to support these use cases in conjunction with our suppliers helping us to achieve them is how we're able to ultimately achieve resilience in our supply chain. Now, it's one thing for me to talk about it and to pontificate on all the things that we need to do in a perfect world to have all of these goals attained. But we do have examples of where a customer has started down this journey. And Shadeh is going to go ahead and talk a little bit about them.
Thank you for your pontification, Mark. Yeah, so supply chain resilience comes and starts with the supplier, right? And so we were really excited to participate in this particular agency's modernization effort in improving the supplier relationship experience. They wanted to have a digital transformation in how they managed vendor onboarding and provide a single digital collaboration point an experience to improve these relationships. So like a lot of our customers in the federal arena, there were a lot of silos and different entry points that they had to deal with. So we hear from customers and suppliers alike, hey, like where do we go if we want to interact with this agency? So that's not something unique to this agency, but it was definitely a top initiative of what they wanted to overcome. That along with again, email and manual processes and the handoff being really sloppy within the many different parts of that agency that needed to provide input with these suppliers. So basically, the goal was to have a consolidation effort to bring all vendor-related communication and management into a single supplier portal. So everything began and started here, from onboarding to the overall management and all the activities subsequently. So being able to kind of cross through some of the existing systems that were in place, many of them legacy, that's the end goal. And so we're trying to get this agency to streamline operations, to create visibility with all of their vendors, with all the vendor management, and in all the areas that Mark already just elaborated on, and overall lowering the risk across their supply chains.
And it's the perfect way to start. And because we are the platform for AI for government, right, this opens up the conduits to be able to leverage advanced capability where predictive analytics can be applied to reports in order to make more actionable decisions, where we can create new KPIs based on what the data is telling us and the workflows that we're processing, right? This is just the beginning, but the future is so much brighter knowing that we have a roadmap of success where AI is a strategic part of all of it. And so, again, we've talked a little bit about what's going on now. We've talked a little bit about what a resilient supply chain is needing. Now I'm going to talk about something that is really core to the presentation today, where we can really supercharge our processes and our operations and really help streamline those supplier relations. So I'm going to give you an example using some of the new capabilities that we released at the beginning of this year with AI agents, right? And so this is just one example of where, as a product team, we have begun to really define exactly what the scope is around how AI agents can help with our suppliers and our supplier relationships and our supplier-based processes. And so we already know our customers, including our friends here today, are enamored with supplier onboarding, but it is still a supervised process, right? Every step that you have to go through still has to have a human being click you to the next step of it in advance, because there's things you need to check, and there's data that needs to be validated, and there's systems to go reference, right? But with our ability to leverage AI agents, that allows us to replace a lot of that manual supervised work with an agent that can undertake it for us, right? So we have an overall agent orchestrator. This agent allows us to ultimately have some form of organization around what it is we're going to do and what we're going to do next. And so once this AI agent orchestrator has been triggered by the creation of, say, like a case, the next thing that happens is we have our request processing agent come in and have its part. What that agent's going to now do is it's going to go ahead and check that case. It's going to see what the priority of it is, who's involved in it, which supplier. It's going to take all of that criteria and say, I now understand this and can summarize this using things like generative AI to help us have an overall understanding about what it is that's the problem and how we can ultimately solve for it. In this example, we're going to go ahead and assume that the solution is that we need a new supplier. And so that case management agent is now going to go ahead and take its part. And it's going to go ahead and say, okay, what is everything that I need in order to ultimately move this forward through the process? So I'm going to get my onboarding agent involved, and it's going to go ahead and start running through that playbook and saying, okay, the data I need is here, check, move on. The approval is necessarily here. It's going to send that approval off and have that supervised, right? But overall, it's going to guide every part of this process to ensure that what needs eyes and what doesn't is all happening according to how we have designed it. Now from there, as we start onboarding these new suppliers, documents are starting to come in, right? We have NDAs, we have MSAs, we have contracts, all these things need to be signed. There are dates and milestones and all kinds of fields that are being populated from these documents that we now have to monitor, especially when we consider that these things expire, right? They're not just in perpetuity for the most part, right? And so then we take and extract those pieces of information utilizing that document agent to put that information into a table that then says, hey, once we have all of it collected, let's continue to monitor it so that when that particular event occurs, when I need a renewal or I need another signature or maybe even a new version of that document, our compliance agent gets involved, and they can go ahead and check against those metrics and automatically send out reminders and information to our suppliers to start regathering that information, all embedded within that original case and that process that involved with that supplier. And so we no longer have to have spreadsheets with 100,000 suppliers listed on them, with another column for dates for when their contracts expire, when their NDAs expire, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And all these different calendar reminders in my Outlook, right? I don't need any of that. All of it's automated, all of it's visible, and our suppliers are able to interact with that seamlessly through our supplier collaboration portal so that we are capturing this information faster, easier, and more efficiently than ever before, taking what typically would be a 3 to 4 month process for onboarding a new supplier, and condensing it down to a number of weeks, depending on how the supplier responds. And so this is a little bit of a preview of how we are looking to take AI agents and apply it to already existing process within the solutions that we offer to help streamline operations for our suppliers and supercharge it. So what does that even mean? What does it mean? Because at the end of the day, it has to make dollars and cents as well, right? There has to be some sort of understanding of the value, right? And so when we think about the challenges that we've talked about today, about having limited visibility to the supply chain, having the need to manage risk, to have a better relationship with our supplier, it all boils down to the types of solutions that we offer across that value chain we saw before. And the outcomes are pretty clear. right? We are able to ultimately prevent shortages and reduce the lead times potentially of how we are ultimately ordering. We're able to reduce costs and reduce maverick spend to ultimately make sure, because our processes are well defined and very visible, that everyone is doing it in the right way, in a consistent way, in a timely way, right? Saving other folks time in hours and allowing those folks to do more strategic things with their time, like deciding whether or not we should go out for another supplier, add another contract to help, again, and reinforce those initiatives to get more contract on spend versus not, and reduce that maverick spend. And of course, avoiding any of those fees that being out of compliance can oftentimes lead to, right? And more importantly, that reputational damage. We want to make sure that at the end of the day, we are forming a cycle of trust that we have between our suppliers, our employees, and our customers and partners. Mm-hmm. And so hopefully y'all have gotten a good idea of how we're able to leverage some AI agents across the supplier and procurement processes that we oftentimes manage every single day, embedded within our platform that is built for AI to work for government. So to wrap up, if you have any questions, myself and Shadeh are available. We can be available right after this. Email's also good too, and we also had the booth where I believe happy hours should be all condensing around. So if you have any questions or just want to learn a little bit more, feel free to go ahead and drop by the booth. Someone will be there to go ahead and answer your questions. And of course, Save the Date for Knowledge 2025. I know I love Vegas, and so I would say this is one of the more prominent events that we at ServiceNow often invite folks to. Really a great learning experience. There are a lot of labs that help us better understand how to implement, how to manage, and how to even create within our platform to ensure that any gaps that exist from out-of-box products, which oftentimes everyone are trying to adapt, right, that we know how to do it in the most effective way possible and scalable way possible. And of course, we have some QR codes here to help you do all of that, learn more, and explore what things we are doing across this platform that we have and love. So with that, go ahead and wrap up and say thank you so much for coming and hearing us talk about this subject. We're excited and enthusiastic about working with all of you to ensure that your supplier operations remain resilient and that we are able to really help streamline what you're doing every single day.
Awesome. Thank you.
Oh, and by the way, just so you know, I actually did end up getting my paddle. So it did come. I did have it in time for the competition. I got silver, so we don't need to talk about that. But thank you so much.